Hello, you're listening to Coaching Skills for Leaders. This is episode number 7, recorded on September 30th, 2011.
Produced by Innovate Learning, maximizing human potential.
Welcome to Coaching Skills for Leaders. My name is Dave Stachowiak. This is the show for leaders who want to develop their coaching skills so they can influence the success of others, their organization, and themselves. Whether you're a seasoned leader or you're leading people for the first time, improving your coaching skills will drive your success and, most importantly, the success of others. This week's topic is Coaching the Millennials, Part 1. One of the biggest struggles that leaders have today in working with people is how to work with the young people in the workforce today. And this is something that as I'm working with clients, I've had people tell me again and again, and probably one of the most common requests I receive is, how do I work effectively with these young folks? And so we're going to tackle this. You may have noticed this is part 1. We're going to tackle this in a 2-episode series here over the next 2 weeks. And I'm really honored that I have 2 guests coming in the next 2 weeks, and I'll introduce our first guest here in just a moment. But before we move forward on talking about the millennials, I think it probably makes sense to take a moment to define who are the millennials. And there's a whole bunch of terms that are used to describe this group: millennials, Generation Y, Nintendo generation. Generally speaking, though, the millennials, for most definitions, are folks that are born between 1980 and 2000. So that 20-year period is generally what we think of the millennial generation. And I was just reading this week in the fall 2011 edition of the Leader to Leader Journal, which I'll talk about here in future episodes. It's a great journal for leaders. They report that there's 44 million millennials already in the workplace, and 46 million more are coming in the next few years. And another interesting statistic that they mention is that 75% of them are planning to find new jobs as the economy improves. So there's going to be a lot of change in the coming years for leaders and those of us who work with this population of folks in our organizations. And one of the other things that this article mentions in Leader to Leader is that generally speaking, many people consider this generation to be very technologically savvy, well-educated, fast learners, very optimistic about the future and their contributions to the world. But in addition to that, they also report that this generation tends to be overconfident, have an inflated opinion about themselves, and also in the need of constant feedback. So we're going to talk about that today and how we can, as leaders and coaches, really work together and have some good tools to be able to communicate well with this organization. And as you're thinking of comments or questions for us and this show today and for our guest, please call them in. You can reach us at 877-LEARN-45 or via email at feedback@innovatelearning.com. And I am honored to welcome a guest here today for our show. And I'm going to introduce Gilbert here in just a moment. One of the things that I like to do is when we're talking about some of these tools and challenges in working with different populations is to invite people in who have a lot of experience with working with those types of populations. And I can't think of a better person to talk with who has experience in working with young people in this generation than my friend Gilbert Fugitt. And Dr. Gilbert Fugitt is Associate Dean of Students at Concordia University here in Irvine, California. And Gilbert, in addition to being an Associate Dean at Concordia, you also are a good friend of ours. And so I'm so glad that you're joining us here in studio today. Thanks for coming by.
Well, Dave, I am honored to be here. Thanks for asking me to be a part of this. And you guys are great friends. We've had some great times there at Pepperdine together.
We did.
Yes.
Gilbert and I went to school together, and actually my wife Bonnie is also a graduate of Pepperdine. Mm-hmm. And so it's great to have you back here. And you know, over the years we've become friends, but also now we're getting to work together again, which is great.
That's
so
best of both worlds. Couldn't ask for more.
Likewise. So let's talk for a few minutes today about the millennial generation. And you probably more than anyone I know have really, in many ways, built your career around working with people who are of this age group, kind of that 1980 to 2000 age group, because I know you've worked for Concordia for a number of years now, and you were involved with leadership development for students and still are in your new role. And prior to that, you were a youth pastor and working with this generation extensively. So I think you just provide a tremendous amount of real life experience with working with this group. And I know you're very passionate about working with them too. So I'm just curious, before we start and get into some of the kind of the nitty gritty, what excites you about working with this generation?
Sure, Dave. Love to talk about that. This seems to be my niche in life, is working with right now the Generation Y. And what excites me about just Generation Y, I get up every day and do the drive that I do to get to working with Concordia and working with these students, is for one, that they are incredibly optimistic, and they're well educated. They do just kind of have this passion about them that they want to go out and change the world. And they're very much more globally connected and oriented. They have, when we were in college 100 years ago, we didn't have Facebook. We didn't have friends from Kenya or South Africa or, China, all these different things that they connect with on a frequent basis. And so they seem much more connected globally and even socially within the United States and things, that they seem to know a lot more people from around. And so this is something that they've used to their advantage, sometimes to their detriment, but oftentimes to their advantage in how they conduct themselves. So that's one thing I see. I see that they can see some possibilities in this world as far as trying to improve and do some things. Social consciousness is a big theme within them. And so that's exciting that I can see kind of this almost just change, that they really are taking advantage of wanting to be a part of the change that's going on and how they can impact that. So
we were talking earlier about some of the patterns that we see with this group of folks at this age group. And one of the things that you talked about right away was technology, and how technology has played a role in the culture of this generation. Tell me a little bit more about that. How do you see technology playing a role in just their everyday interactions with you and in the school environment and ultimately in the workplace?
Certainly, yeah. I have seen where now cell phones at one point, 10 years ago, were something that you had as a necessity and things like that, and you used, and it become kind of common. Within the last 10 years, it's exploded. And now, the iPhone, the BlackBerry, all these kind of things, it seems to be a prerequisite. You need to have that in order to function in the society, especially within the millennials. And we have one student who doesn't have text messaging. And you would think about it, 10 years ago, there might only have been one student that had text messaging. That's a student, would have been a student leader. And so it's changed where now everybody talks through text. And not only text, but on your iPhone, you can do, face-to-face. I think it's called FaceTime. And, so you can do that, and you can post videos, and they immediately go on the internet, and everybody's got a video, and they put it on YouTube, and then they throw it, on their whatever social media network. And so technology's really influenced. I've seen the programs, what they do, how they conduct their lives. Immediately when they do something, they expect everybody else to see it, and not only see it, but they expect their friends and family to comment on what they've done. So within technology, they really are always connected. Facebook is never really turned off on their phones and things like that. And so within the working world, they can leverage that to a company or organization's advantage. How we use it at Concordia is, they communicate to their other student bodies through Twitter, through Facebook, through texting, what's happening or what opportunities going on right now, which has really proved to be effective for them. And so that's just one area. It can't be the only area, but it's now been a really good area that they've utilized, I see.
What are some of the obstacles that the faculty and staff run into with working with this generation that you see as typical patterns?
Sure. What we've really tried to address with our students has been email etiquette. And is because, one way we certainly communicate as a university, and I think most organizations would be through email. Well, what we find is sometimes students try and communicate through email as they do through texting, and their etiquette and grammar instead of addressing somebody with proper respect. That's one thing that I see with the generation, that they're so used to their parents being friends, almost not as seen as authority figures, that we have problems with them addressing our president as president and not just hey Kurt, how you doing, and their professors calling them first names. That there's sometimes a lack of authority, addressing that. And so that's one thing that we do address with that. But however, the students, when they do, they can make some very intricate videos and things like that can be really beneficial to their classroom learning experience, being student leaders. One of our students just put together an intramural video, and it's kind of gone, viral across Facebook and everywhere else. And
wow.
And it's something they've promoted and things like that. And they have a very big high need to go green now. I've discovered a lot of students. So instead of filling out paperwork and things like that, they kind of always ask the questions, can we do this all online? Is it possible to do it online? And I think more companies are beginning to do that. That also saves resources for companies too, to be able to in our university, to not have to print off everything. So
I know one of the struggles that many leaders I've worked with in organizations in the past few years is, how to really engage this audience.
Sure.
And, engagement's just a huge word right now as far as this generation and trying to do that well. So when trying to help millennials learn, sure, what should people do to really engage this group?
Sure. And certainly, yeah, that's a great question, because, sometimes we get so involved with the technology world, we try and engage them so much there, and then it seems like they figure out right away that we're not really experts on that. And so really how this generation likes to be engaged is face-to-face. They like FaceTime. They like building the personal relationships. Much more than even when certainly when I was in college. I don't remember going and spending time in our coach's office or a student affairs person office or my professor's office. And they do like to go to lunch. They like to come and just sit and debrief about their day and about their plans for the future. So building that personal relationship, they need that. They are very well connected technology-wise, but they desperately desire the human touch, the human factor of personal relationships. They seem to really be desiring that.
And it also sounds to me, in some of the reading I've done, that some of them also fear that. Mm-hmm. They're so comfortable online, mm-hmm, that there's this fear about engaging people or even getting in a conversation where they have to respond immediately, where they don't have that time to think about how they're going to text back or message back. Mm-hmm. What's been your experience with that? Have you run into students that have had, and young people have had challenges with that?
Yeah, certainly at first, when they don't really know you, they're a lot of them are quite guarded sometimes because, they're not sure about how to work with adults in a professional manner.
Sure.
And so, that sometimes they like to have that little delay where they can take time to text, and calling them kind of throws them off. If you need to call them on their cell phone, they'd much rather text.
I found that. Yeah.
So sometimes it's really working with them to say, no, you need to go and have a conversation with that person. Or when I work with them, I much rather call people than just text all the time. And
sure,
so they kind of learn that mode, and then we work on that. And so with my student leaders, I really challenge them that you need to be able to stand and talk with people, not just text all the time. You need to be able to have that conversation, create some deep, meaningful relationships with others. And so that's something that we work on. And it takes time to build this, because honestly, a lot of these students are not coming in with those skills, and they haven't developed them in high school, and they've been allowed to kind of be on their computers and live in that virtual world. And so that's why sometimes I take them away to a camp where their cell phones won't work, and they don't have TV and things like that. And so we take time to really get to know each other and work on these verbal kind of communications.
Let me ask you some more about this, because I think this is really kind of one of the big obstacles for a lot of leaders once this group gets to the corporate world, is kind of that starting point.
Sure.
How to get beyond the, they know what to do once they've got that engagement, but they see someone walk into their organization that is not real comfortable engaging, not real comfortable initially in one-on-one conversation, and they don't know how to like jump over that hump.
Yeah.
And so what would be your advice, Gilbert, for leaders and organizations who don't necessarily have the resources or the ability to take folks out on a retreat, or what are some things you've seen that have worked really well for faculty and staff just to start that engagement process?
Yeah. For leaders within organizations, for when I train these student leaders, but not only do we need to spend time. I need to make sure to be very clear on the expectations and very clear on how the organization works, why we do what we do. So the whole kind of mentality of, well, this is just how it's always been done, doesn't work with this generation. There needs to be kind of a conversation on, this is why we do what we do. This is why we approach a situation the way we do. This is, and when you now started, with new, even having, graduate assistants there. And so we talk about protocol. Okay, when this situation comes up, this is why we do it the way we do it. And really being clear about that and not assume that they will understand that. And I think that then gives them a level of comfort where then they will be able to function within that organization. Where I see students fail is if they are thrown into an organization with very little direction and kind of assume that they know what to do, and then they just kind of almost wither. They become very apathetic because they don't know if they're succeeding, but they don't know if they're failing, and they need that kind of feedback where it says, okay, and they can take the honest feedback. Yeah, okay, I understood where you were going with that, but this is really the direction our organization is going. And this is why, this is the protocol, and this is why we've established that way. Now we can discuss maybe how we can change it in the future, but right now this is what we expect, and this is how it really works well. So
it sounds like, if I'm thinking back to kind of classical leadership management theory, tell people what to do was kind of step one, and many leaders and managers are used to that, but it sounds like what you're saying is, yes, certainly tell them what to do, but in addition to that, take the next step of what's the why behind the what. Yep. So why are we taking these actions? Why does the organization do this? And if you can articulate that clearly to this generation, that will help you to engage them more quickly.
Exactly. They will get that buy-in on this is why we are doing this, and not just because they want meaning within their work. And I believe that's what this generation wants. They don't just want to sell a widget. They need to know how this is, benefiting humanity, and what has gone on to go into production of this, and why our company believes this is important that we're doing that. Because once you get them bought into a belief and that this is why we're doing that, then you have a better opportunity that they're going to stay with the organization, and they'll be one of your most productive employees, I believe.
And I think that this could also be a huge opportunity for leaders too, who are really able to engage at that level, because you get a group of people that are just passionate about going after causes. I know some of the young people and my life, I'm just amazed at the passion they have for doing things that I don't think most of the people that I knew when I was that age had.
Oh yeah, and that is something too that as leaders within organizations is to take time to even know what's going on outside of work, because some of these students are involved with nonprofit organizations that are doing amazing work out there. And sometimes maybe they can intermix within their work world and things. And so, to kind of engage, some of these students do want to make an impact, and to spend a little time to get to know what's going on there, and then kind of help that bleed over into the work world, if possible, if that can happen.
So speaking of the work world, when leaders are working with young people of this age, as they're developing them, as that development process is going on, what's the best way that leaders can communicate with this generation?
Sure. Well, again, there's you have to be almost have to look at it with multi-dimensional ways. You have to be able to communicate, certainly, and I think for the younger workers coming in, they need the face-to-face talking, meetings if possible, but also you need to be able to through email, and then the way to communicate really through them is to have a conversation. Maybe try and stay away from almost the dictator approach. You get up, you say something, and then you expect them all to follow. It's almost better that if you can get them within small groups, you can have focus groups, and you kind of help them, see that together. I mean, that's powerful. If you get a group of young people that are coming to your organization, really help create a cohort system if possible. And work through that. They love group work. These students are that's what they've grown up with. And when I've taught classes, they often beg to group projects now. Some of them don't like it, but a lot of them, they really want to have a group they want that group experience.
And our generation hated that.
Yes,
we never wanted to group work.
No, we were like, another group project. Okay, so but no, they crave it. They've kind of, that was a model I think that started happening in the K through 12. And so that's what they're used to.
Interesting. So what have you found that works with giving feedback and praise to this generation? Because one of the things that we hear about in the literature a lot is that they want a lot of feedback. They want, so what's your experience with that, Gilbert?
Sure. Yeah, and the feedback and praise portion of this is quite interesting. For one, they do desire constant feedback because that's what they've got. Their teachers have always been connected to their parents through email throughout the K through 12 system. So now instantly, okay, little Johnny had a bad day. The teacher might have emailed their parents or and so they've had this constant monitoring almost. Then all of a sudden they get in the work world and maybe once a year there's a performance review that's done. So they're not getting this daily kind of mentoring or things like that. So be able to give the constant feedback, but truly make sure you're praising them for jobs well done. They have been praised, unfortunately, too often for work that wasn't superior throughout their experience. There's a great book out there, Not Everybody Gets a Trophy, and it talks about how things when we were kids, a team might have won and the champion got a trophy. Well, now it seems like, I guess, and I haven't seen this yet, but because my daughter's too young, but at some point it seems like, I guess, every team now gets a trophy. Every player on every team gets some type of trophy. So now it feels watered down that everybody must get an award. And in the same way in their education, maybe they all got A's and their work wasn't superior, but yet it was rewarded that way. And they're very smart. They can understand when they've not put the best effort into it. Mm-hmm. And, with some of my student leaders, I've had to be very honest. I go, this is not a good effort. And they're like, yeah, I know. And I go, you can do better. And so we challenge them to be able to do better and say, that's what we expect. And I believe once you set those expectations, they're starving to have those type of expectations and to have everybody else held accountable to that level of expectations.
So honesty, authenticity are huge with this group, and being able to give feedback that's really connected to evidence too, it sounds like is huge as far as being able to engage them. Yeah,
and being transparent. This generation wants you to be more transparent. And, if you have to make a difficult decision within your organization, like we've had to at school a few times, is, say, this is why this is happening. And I know you may not agree with it now, and this is a tough direction we have to go. And but this is kind of where we're at on it, and be as transparent as you can. And they appreciate that. They appreciate being honest and transparent, and they can see through the fakeness, and they won't buy into an organization that goes along with that.
We're just about the end of our time. So anything that I know, time flies when we're having fun.
That's right.
Anything you'd like to add that you think should be something that if you were a leader in a business today, that or if you were advising a leader in a business today, what would be the one thing you'd want them to remember from working with this age group?
Sure. I think this generation is exciting. They're probably one of the most well-educated generations to come about because of all the technology. They have instant access. If you ask them a question, they can find it on their iPhone or their BlackBerry. They can find this instantly. It's at their fingertips. So as a leader, we must think about how we're going to engage that to further improve our organization, and then how we're going to leverage that and help them to seek buy-in. So again, I think personal relationships, deep personal relationships with these employees, spend time and help them see the why behind your organization.
Gilbert Fugitt is Associate Dean of Students at Concordia University in Irvine, California. Gilbert, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Dave. I loved it.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Gilbert Fugitt. Gilbert, in addition to being a great friend of mine, is, as you can tell, someone who's really passionate about working with this generation of young people who are transitioning into the workplace, and in many cases transitioning into a workplace that doesn't know a lot about how to interact with them and how to coach and develop them. So I hope some of those tools that Gilbert had mentioned will be helpful to you, and that you'll take that advice and put it into practice. And as you do, that you'd stay connected with me and with this show and let me know what worked effectively for you, and also what comments and questions you have. And as you're thinking about comments and questions and how to implement some of the things we've talked about today, I also would encourage you to come back and listen to part 2 of this topic that's going to be next week. So we're going to keep talking about how to coach the millennials. And I'm really excited for our guest next week, who, in addition to someone who has a lot of experience working with young people, I'm a huge fan of, and that's because I happen to be married to her. So in addition to her being my best friend and life partner, Bonnie Stachowiak, who will be with us next week, is an associate professor of business at Vanguard University, just down the road from Concordia, where Gilbert works. And in addition, Bonnie has had a tremendous amount of leadership experience in corporate America too. So she really brings a great perspective on how to work with young people. And I really encourage you to reach out with questions that you may have for us on this topic this week, so that we can address them during part 2 of this episode. And if you have a question or comment for the show, you can call me at 877-LEARN-45, or you can email that comment or question to feedback@innovatelearning.com. And you can stay connected to this show and future updates on iTunes. Just search for Coaching Skills for Leaders, or the BlackBerry Podcast app. You can subscribe there for free. And Gilbert had mentioned some tools and resources during our interview, so you can check out links to those on our website. Just search for episode number 7, Coaching Skills for Leaders, at innovatelearning.com. And of course, we're on Facebook too, Innovate Learning. So we look forward to having you back here next week. Thanks again for listening, and looking forward to your feedback. Have a great week out there leading, folks, and see you next Monday for part 2 of Coaching the Millennials. Have a great week, everybody.